Hello everybody, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to rebuild the carburetor, replace the timing chain, and set the points on this 1985 XL100. Regardless of which video you're watching, the first steps you'll need to do are the same. You'll have to remove the seat, and you'll have to remove the side cover, and you'll have to loosen the fuel tank. So if you're rebuilding the carburetor, what you should do is that you should make sure that you have the petcock set to off. And I would recommend that before you do anything else to the carburetor, you loosen that screw right there, which is the fuel valve, and drain the fuel that is in the bowl. And if you're readjusting the float valve on the carburetor, what you should do is that you should take a container like this prescription bottle and drain it into the prescription bottle and mark where the fluid level is, so that you can tell if you've actually adjusted the fluid level, gone up or down when you're reassembling it. My fuel hose, the overflow hose, I redid mine so that it comes out here, but the stock version just dumps it onto the engine. Alright, here's my carburetor that's removed from the bike. One thing to note is that basically every year of XL100 had a different model of carburetor. Mine, being an 85, has PD 82A carburetor. The only year that had the same one was 83 and 84. So what I'm going to do first is that I am going to set the float level, so that involves removing the screws. Okay, so if you're adjusting your float, what you'll need to do is that you'll want to measure the float when this arm, you see the one that's holding the needle, when that is just touching the top of the needle. So if you see how it's currently not touching, you do it now. You'd measure it right now, where it's just touching. If you can go lower, but that will throw off your reading. You want to do it when it's just barely touching like it now. You'll put the ruler on the gasket surface of the carburetor and measure it against the top of this float. And by top, I mean facing down, so this part. And you'll measure it, and the spec for it is 12.5 millimeters. Now that I've adjusted the float height, the next thing I'll be doing is the rebuild of the carburetor. If you can find a rebuild kit, an OEM rebuild kit for your carburetor, it'll come with 4 things. It will come with the needle seat, it will come with the throttle needle itself, it will come with the spring retainer, and it will come with the C-clip that you put over the top of the throttle needle. So to rebuild it, the first thing you'll want to do is remove the float and everything, and then unscrew the main jet. Okay, once you remove your main jet, you'll need to uninstall the needle seat. So the way you do that is you come in from the top with a piece of metal, and you just push the seat down into the bowl, basically. If you plan on reusing the needle seat, I suggest using something softer than brass, because you could deform it and then it will not work again. The installation process is just the same in reverse. This part should be facing up into the venturi. That part should be facing down towards the bowl. The way mine fought me a little, so what I did was that I just put this piece of metal and I gave it a few whacks. And that was enough to get it into the venturi like it should be. I also put it in the freezer, so that would be a bit smaller and go in a bit easier. I don't know how much of a difference that made, but that's how I did it. So after you do that, you should start reinstalling everything. Okay, an interesting note about slide needles. Sometimes they come with additional notches cut in the top. So you'll see the one on the top has these notches. That allows you to change the tune of the main jet, depending on where it's set. So if you move that C-clip towards the top of the needle, it is going to be leaner because it sits further into the jet. If you move this guy towards the bottom, it's going to be richer because the needle sits less in the way of the fuel. For some really stupid reason, the XL100 doesn't come with those notches. The reason my old one has it is this is a rebuild kit from an XR100. And I put it up a notch because the needle is thinner. Alright, so to replace the throttle needle, what you have to do is you have to compress the slide against the cap, and that will poke out the end of the throttle cable. As you can see right there, it's poking out, and you'll take some needle nose pliers and you'll pull on that, and then you'll pull it over this slot, and it will go outside the slide, and that will release everything. So as you can see, I have the cable poking out, and so if I release that, everything will go everywhere. Just keep going out. Ah, there we go. And I think I got everything in there. Be careful about the spring retainer. If you don't have a replacement, it will get lost. I think mine's still in there. Yep, as you can see, it's still in there. And so if you're replacing the needle, you'll remove the old needle and then you'll put your new needle in. And okay, so this is the most tricky part of the whole process, is reassembling the slide. And what isn't there is the needle would go in that hole below, and then the spring retainer, or the spring separator, would go on top of that. And then, so what you'd do is you'd have the cable, you'd have the spring pushing up against the cap. The cable would go through the very center of the spring. And so what you have to do is that you have to compress this spring with one hand, and then feed this cable, the end of this cable, through this hole. And it will slide down the end of it, and eventually once you get it over the bottom of it, you can release everything, and then the spring will be pushing against the cap, and then it will slide into the spring separator, and that will keep everything in tension. Okay, I've reassembled it. It wasn't that hard because I've done it so many times. So you can see what I was talking about. So in the very center, you can see the needle itself. Then there's the C-clip, and the C-clip is what's pushing against the spring retainer. It's that W-shaped thing. And you can see how the legs of the W, the cable goes between them and the bottom, right there. And then the throttle cable goes out this side, and then it goes up this hole. I can't really show it. And then, yeah, it just goes out the end. So everything's ready to be reassembled. Alright, so now that everything is installed on this bike, I'm going to make sure that the bike can run before I put everything back together. And that's what you should do too. When you're running your bike, you shouldn't be doing it in an enclosed place with the door closed like that. I'm just going to start it real quick. Don't follow my example with the enclosed space. Alright. Alright, I'm going to turn that off before I kill myself. Alright, so you can see it runs. There's some potential when you change the float level that the setting that you need to use for the choke will not be the same as what you're used to before. So that's why you should test it. So that concludes the end of this video. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.